Hello dear viewer and welcome back to Let's Save the Planet by creating an infinite source of energy in the form of J.R.R. Tolkien spinning in his grave ever faster. Hell, I would love to have the time and patience to make an episode by episode, scene by scene, careful analysis of the Rings of Power. There is so much quintessential bad writing.
Owlish beard! Enough with the quail sauce! Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
That unpacking all of it would be extremely time-consuming but also educational. Nevertheless, I have other things to do, so let's look at episodes 5 and 6. Problem by problem, not scene by scene. It is such a masterful symphony of cringe and laziness, I can hardly believe it even exists. It's stunning in a way. Let's start with something nice. For a change, there's a scene in episode 5 when Liberace and little Ned Stark discuss Ned's secret, an oath of secrecy in fact. Ned would need to break it in order to save the entire elven race. That's a really sudden raise of stakes, by the way. For a minute or two, let's forget about the brain-dead absurdity of this premise. And yes, the secret is already out, at least if we assume a modicum of intelligence in Gil-Galad, which I know is a brave assumption.
Please forgive our sacrilege, Lord Durin.
Yes, Celebrimbor is insanely annoying each time he opens his mouth, I will give you that. And yes, he's not even real Celebrimbor, and nothing really makes sense. But in this very scene, Liberace makes an argument, a convincing one, about Ned's dad. And it is actually quite cool.
It's quite cool.
Because it means this scene feeds off a scene from the previous episode, which was also decent in terms of dialogue and acting, while affecting decisions of another character, meaning both of these scenes are connected quite naturally. Bringing up Elrond's dad in a very suitable fashion for both of these scenes reveals some new information on a key character and, at least in theory, can affect the entire plot beyond what's apparent from the dialogue. So in a nutshell, it's quite effective and proper writing-wise. Unfortunately, there is also everything else in this stinky pile of old socks known as Rings of Power. Even despite the titanic effort to make bits of these two scenes perfect, even the plot they belong to is oddly lazy. Like, really? Mithril is what holds the light of Valinor? Without it, the elves would just perish somehow or turn into wights and ghosts, I guess. I don't know. It has nothing to do with Tolkien, so hard to tell. And, nothing to do with Tolkien is what we came to expect from this show. The key is convenience, and the showrunners are extremely vague or very particular in their treatment of the source material depending on what is most suitable for their horrible and inconsistent ideas.
Why do some elves have short hair? Patrick.
Elves, like any race of many, many beings, don't all look the same all the time, especially not over thousands of years, and in the books it sure felt like that's what Tolkien was saying too, so that's what we did.
The most interesting example is their treatment of the warrior Galad lady. They base the entire character concept on a little side remark made by Tolkien in the Unfinished Tales, or some letter saying Galadriel was of Amazon disposition when she was young, sparring with the boys and braiding her hair so that they don't get in the way. I used to have long hair. You absolutely need them off your face when doing any sort of strenuous physical or precise activity. So naturally in that one scene when she actually engages in a practice fight, she needs her hair flowing and wild, and she wears a fabulous blue gown because pretty, I guess. She does look nice in blue, though. See? This is how desperate I am to find something positive about this show. Yeah, Morphet looks nice in blue. Jesus Christ. This brings me to what is possibly the dumbest scene of the entire show so far. Can't be sure, the competition is really steep. Warrior Princess Galad Lady trains some Númenórean conscripts in the marketplace. Really. This one sentence I just wrote creates a cascade of problems. We do know Númenor used to have colonies, even in the very progressive world of this show, so they aren't exactly pacifists. They are also depicted as a a very advanced civilization. So I am really curious, why is there no standing army, no legions, no professionals, no mercenary bands even? Just a conscript army made out of sailors and students, apparently? Why are they training in the market square with some freaking stairs? Is there no barracks, no training ground? Did you run out of money in this billion-dollar show? Did you have to reuse a set piece from before? It's just so sad. It's so sad, it's bad. It's bad and it's sad. It's... And why is Warrior Gal the only one to train them? Especially that her advice, supposedly coming from centuries of experience, boils down to some extremely obvious remarks.
Stab, twist, gut. Swordsmanship is about balance rather than strength. Fight with your feet.
And the scene itself is so drawn and long, I really forgot what it was supposed to be about. Because I already know Warrior Gal is super cool and awesome. I really know that, believe me, if there is anything this show wants to drive home, is that Warrior Gal is awesome. But as of the later episodes, the show actually tries to implement some self-awareness to her. And I am finding myself half a step from understanding her and maybe even liking her somewhat. But then they have to fuck it up, and yet another manifestation of the awesome strong female psycho they forcing her to be becomes apparent. It is a very powerful pattern, especially in her scenes with Halbrand. She is sorry for using him, she almost understands she needs to let him be as he wants, but hey, no, actually we need to keep using him, and I am awesome, believe me, I am so awesome and so awesome. And there is an explanation or an answer to that later in the episode, and it's completely empty, hollow, and useless. She then has to make him go with her to Middle-earth, because otherwise she wouldn't get her 3 little boats with perfectly disposable Numenorians. Halbrand is a little bit undecided, so the conversation gets a bit confrontational. And he tells her, rightly, her urge to fight Sauron is all about vengeance. She then utters perhaps the silliest, most inconsistent line ever to grace her ever-angry lips. Can't be quite sure. Again, the competition is very steep. He asks, why do you keep fighting? Why do you have to keep fighting? Or something like that. And she answers,
because I cannot stop.
You Damquat, this is not the answer to the question. It's like I asked you, I've heard you like the color green. Why? Well, because I feel it's a nice color. Yes, I bloody well know that. I already established you like the color green, but I asked why? Why do you read The Lord of the Rings for the 4th time? Because it's my favorite book. Yes, that's quite apparent that it is your favorite book, but my question was, why is it your favorite book? I am trying to understand the causal freaking connections here. The dialogue could go backwards and pretty much nothing would change in terms of information. Why can you not stop fighting? Because I have to keep fighting. It's not even a dialogue, it's an exchange of sounds. Did anyone proofread this? Well, I'm sure it's all a painfully slow build-up to episode 7, especially that in episode 6, Galadriel actually seems to understand the scale of her inner darkness. She realizes how much she touched the darkness. So much she's elbows deep in it. The confrontation with Uncle Benjen, the corrupt elf, will open her eyes to it. She will have a major emotional breakdown in episode 7, humiliating, but it will start her journey towards becoming the actual Galadriel. Lol, now she indulges in bloodthirst and bloodlust even more, and an episode later, when her heart should be broken to pieces, she is super cool Warrior Gal again. Yet again, I can only feel pity for Morfydd Clark for being expected to act out this character writing monstrosity. But yeah, her scene with Adar is another best example of the worst, so let's look at that one, I guess. Because it stinks of indecision, of the same problem with the writers realizing how horrible of a person she comes across to be. They know she needs to realize it and do something about it in order to get some sympathy from the audience, but every avenue to that breakthrough would be slightly humiliating to her, so that is not allowed. we cannot have that. It should happen, not because she's a girl, by the way, but because she is a narcissistic moron. So Uncle Benjamin is captured by Galad Lady and anti-Aragorn after the least epic of epic battle scenes. Basically, they fight over a hamlet. 300 guys and gals, remember, there are girls there too. They ride to the rescue in their boob armors that for some reason have scale armor on top of hard breastplates. It doesn't bother me at all, though. It's not weird or silly. No, not at all. Oh, but going back to the scene, it is another one of those where a warrior gal is half a step from a character breakthrough. It is quite surprising they even went this far. Uncle Benjamin has a truth bomb to throw on her.
Seem I'm not the only elf alive that's being transformed by darkness.
It is oddly satisfying and cool when the antagonist provides a vital life lesson to the protagonist. It happens in Nolan's Batman movies on a regular, and I love it.
I'm not afraid of you.
Because you think you got nothing to lose. But you haven't thought it through. People from your world have so much to lose.
They're only as good as the world allows them to be. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other.
Peace has cost you your strength. Victory has defeated you.
Hearing some difficult truth coming from people you have no respect for can be shocking and demanding and challenging. It's a perfect springboard into improvement of your arguments and generally rethinking your worldview.
Look the fuck out.
So naturally, Warrior Gal goes on a rant about how much she would like to commit orcicide. She is, like, really into it, to the degree that makes me question her hero status. Well, that's not the only thing that makes me question that. I think she is way more villainous than the villain here in this scene. And it could have been intentional, possibly, hard to tell with this show, but assuming it was, it's just a giant why. I find it very hard to believe there are no other elves in Lindon who lost as much as she did. I think, judging by the source material and the opening scenes of this very show, there must have been many more elves like her. So why is she the one to be so obsessed with the fight while others aren't? Oh, because she can't stop. Yes, sure, it's my bad. That explains everything. Fucking hell. Have you ever wondered why the main characters in The Lord of the Rings would never go this far with their hatred of orcs? I know Gimli and Legolas had their banter competition, but that's, well, a friendly banter of two soldiers. It is not a bloodthirsty desire to eradicate the entire race. And remember why exactly Aragorn told his soldiers not to show any mercy to the orcs? Yeah, because there's basically no other choice. There is no point in showing them mercy. Ordering your soldiers to forget mercy on the field of battle is still miles away from gloating about mass annihilation in front of a captive. A helpless captive. It's a matter of pressure, the importance of Helm's Deep, and so on. Aragorn never boasts of the number of orcs he has slain. Even the movie itself hardly ever celebrates his kills or his combat skills with slow-mo and such things. Certainly much less than for Legolas. Even the fucking camera knows Aragorn doesn't need to be perceived as an awesome killer on the battlefield in that movie. But Warrior Gal is not Aragorn. We give her an explosive sword, make all Númenóreans around her extremely clumsy, and make sure that random characters look at her in awe, celebrating her dark urges the way Gandalf was celebrated when he saved the lives of doomed Gondor soldiers while manifesting his supernatural, angelic nature. I don't think there is anything in the books or in the Jackson's Lord of the Rings comparable to this shit here. She double gone and lost in the realm of carnage. Uncle Ben is right, and it has no impact on her behavior. If anything, it makes her double down because I don't know what can possess a writer supposedly trying to emulate Tolkien to write something like this. I have no idea. I am sorry in advance for bringing this up, but the girl power explanation seems quite likely. It would be hard to find a guy in this show who, for what we know so far, has such an uncontrollable bloodlust and is still celebrated this much. In fact, it happens at the cost of character development and consistency for girls, while the only guy whose combat skills are even remotely celebrated is quite likely Sauron. Or a future Nazgul. He certainly has some very dark secret. This brings me to Bronwyn and her plot, if you can call it that. I find it very interesting how little attention is paid after episode 1 to her romantic relationship, and how much we are supposed to venerate her as a leader. Her sudden propelling into the leader role is way more jarring than Galadriel's, especially if Galadriel was actually capable of self-awareness. So we know she is a healer, Bronwyn I mean, and among the Southerners from the Southlands, stupid name by the way, it's what people from the North would call that, the actual Southerners would not call themselves that because they don't live to the south of themselves. Whew. I can't move an inch in this story without stumbling on something monumentally silly. Anyway, Bronwyn. Bronwyn is a healer. She, of all the characters, should have the most ambiguous approach to violence. She should have experienced healing wounds of battle and brawl, and she should try to avoid that. What is her argument to convince her people to defend themselves? She chopped an orc's head off and brought it to the inn, off screen. Of course, why would we want to see her reaction to what is possibly the first kill in her life? What are we, human? She chops the head off camera and arrives in the tavern already quite empowered and sure of herself. Is she a famous orc slayer in her spare time? She gets another one in episode 6, 2 kills actually, because she saves first the entire battle plan, which is a stupid plan anyway, and then her boyfriend. I am sorry to offend any modern sensibilities, but a person in her position, not just a woman mind you, anyone with no experience in battle, should cede the responsibilities of leadership to Arondir, not because he's a man mind you, but because he actually has some combat experience. He may be the only experienced fighter there. And I know they are sort of trying to convey they are leading together, but it is Bronwyn who speaks to the crowds from the highest position, literally and metaphorically. She always has the last word in those shared speeches and behaves like a total badass when the battle is ongoing. So if I am wrong, please tell me how, because I see no guys so inexplicably powerful and unnecessarily celebrated like the two female characters of this show. A healer and a mother can be a very interesting character, but nope, we need to make her yell stuff at people and decapitate orcs. There is even a completely made-up girl in Elendil's family who after 6 or 7 episodes still has nothing to do. Her character isn't even properly introduced yet, so the question may arise if she is in the show just so we can say we have women in STEM fields in Middle-earth. Is some hot-headed completionist having a go with a Bechtel test again?
Cocksuckers and flag burners.
Bronwyn would be much more interesting if she was allowed to be a healer and a mother, to be honest. What we get is simply inexplicable. No idea why these people would follow her, no idea why she herself would think she should lead them. It could be explained and make more sense, but not with these writers, who enjoy restating and retelling the same points that have been explained already, while completely ignoring the massive list of new problems they constantly create. Which brings me to the pacing, which is still in the gutter despite them doing their best. I think I figured out why the pacing seems so atrocious, why it sometimes feels like we rush through plot points while also dragging the scenes and plot and stretching them forever. It's because some plots are rushing while the others are dragging, depending on what the writers currently need.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Rushing or dragging?
Rushing.
So you do know the difference!
There is nothing of substance happening in the Harfoot's plot after not Gandalf is found and episode 7 when he leaves and then the Harfoots decide to go after him. It could have been done in 2 episodes, maybe 3, but we waste time on running in circles. The stranger is good, but then he seems bad. He doesn't, but the writers want us to believe so. And then he's good again, and female Frodo believes in herself, but then she doubts herself, but then she believes in herself again, and we know from the very beginning she will believe in herself anyway, and then she doubts again. Meanwhile, the most unexpected plot of Uncle Benjen barely gets any proper exposition while rushing through the major plot points, to the point when the confrontation between him and Warrior Gal is much less satisfying and fulfilling than it could have been if they had any prior knowledge of each other. But with what we get, it seems almost forced how quickly they get on honest with each other, and how swiftly it escalates to orcheside talk. It's almost as if those two plots were written by completely different writers, which is not completely impossible, I guess, in the times of writers' rooms. Speaking of Uncle Benjamin, I think some people are under the impression that his master plan in episode 6 is like so amazing and mind-blowing. And you know, I am feeling generous today. Sure, the moment when he snaps the victory out of the jaws of defeat and creates Mordor in one go is probably the best unexpected turn in this show so far, and he himself is a notable, somewhat interesting character. But there is one problem corrupting the scenes of his triumph, the same problem corrupting most of these scripts actually, and many other stories these days. In order to make one character impressive, we need to suddenly make all characters around him imbeciles. Basically, the IQ of all characters fluctuates from room temperature to 900 depending on what is currently needed by the plot. So Uncle Benjamin needs that evil sword from that shed from the beginning of the show. The audience doesn't know it yet, but that sword can create Mordor if some trenching and tunneling is involved beforehand. That's all well and good, it just sounds completely silly in abbreviation, but after he loses the epic battle of Shithole, he runs away with a decoy sword, not that sword at all, just a hatchet wrapped in some linen. He is then caught in another absurd scene I don't have the time or patience to talk about. His wrapped hatchet is of course confiscated. And no, not a soul, not the amazing commander of the Northern armies, not the Aragorn wannabe, and not even Don Lemon. Nobody tries to unwrap that item. They don't even try to feel it through the linen to check if the shape, size, and weight matches. It's utterly insane. So in the end, Uncle Benjamin succeeds only because the writers want him to, and not because his plan was so amazing. In fact, the entirety of his plan depends on his enemies being senseless morons. I thought only Warrior Gal makes such assumptions about her enemies, but apparently it's everyone in Middle-earth. We have indeed been told many lies of Middle-earth by this fucking show. The MacGuffin sword is generally lazily written, one of the laziest MacGuffins in the history of MacGuffins actually. They want a shortcut to Tolkien tropes again. We get a scene when Arondir whacks that blade with a dingly little hammer. The hammer breaks, of course, because why not? And he proclaims the sword is beyond their capacity to destroy. I mean seriously? Have you tried smelting, dude? Or throwing a very large heavy rock on top of it? Hell, try a better hammer at least before you give up. And no, it's not even remotely comparable to the One Ring. At the moment Elrond proclaims the ring cannot be destroyed, the audience is quite well informed about the ring already. We know it's a famous item, so its properties can be well known. We know the elves had 3 other rings of power, likely forged with similar techniques, that they could study for thousands of years. It may not be good enough for some absolute perfectionist, but it is good enough to convince most people. Who is convinced by this little hammer breaking here? It would be better if you just did all of it off screen. For once, something that you should have done off screen, you of course do on screen. Jesus. It is yet again a scene that stinks of a first draft, a rushed first draft. So no, these 2 episodes did not convince me to change my mind about anything. In some regards, they are better than episode 3 and 4. Something is happening. Wow, some character moments are somewhat satisfying, some glimmers of good ideas try to shine through the sea of rotten poo-poo. I am afraid at this point they can only underline the poo-poo. The result is a bowl of shiny excrements. And it is a shame because at least the potential for a decent show is there somewhere buried deep beneath the poo-poo. It's even more annoyingly tragic in episode 7, which comes close to redeeming and saving the show at a few different points just to do a funny flip half a step away from achieving that. Well, yeah, a few steps away actually. It is very frustrating, and at this point I am much less angry than I was in my first Rings of Power review. At this point it's just sad.